Hello and welcome to another episode of Game Theory, the #1 MMA DFS prep show in all of the land. I am your host, M.O.N.K, aka the Monk Petition. And in this very episode, we've got a few banger fights for UFC Paris. Happening this Saturday, September 2nd, I believe 12 p.m. Eastern time. So get those lineups in early, get those bets in early as well. Not as early as last week. We got about 7 hours later, maybe 8 or 9, I don't know, several hours later, but get them in early. Guys, we've got a banger heavyweight fight. Serghei Spivac taking on Ciryl Gane. Lots of certainty on both sides of that fight from what I see on Twitter this week. Manon Fiorot taking on Namajunas, Benoit Saint-Denis, Thiago Moises. Those are the top 3 fights on the main card. Then we've got a little bit of a shake 'em up. Shake 'em up, shake 'em up, shake 'em up, shake 'em. With Almeida dropping out and Gaffarov dropping out as well. I believe now Taylor Lapilus is taking on Loughran and William Gomis taking on Ghemmouri. So even if those fights aren't actually true, but I think they are happening, you will see all the stats from every fighter fighting on this weekend's card on the screen at some point.
Showtime. We're gonna go nuts in there.
Very quickly, before we get started, here's the basic idea of what you will be seeing on my slides going forward. If you focus on the top row here on the left side, you have the DraftKings salary, the amount of KO TKOs, submissions, decisions, and average fight time in the UFC. Then we have the fighter's UFC record and exact record. Exact record meaning, as you can see on the screen, it says 3 rounds bantamweight. However many fights that fighter has at those parameters is what the exact record is. And if you'll take a look at the main part of the screen, I have graphed every fighter's at distance and inside the distance DraftKings points percentages. Very simple process, then just threw them on a scatter point graph and made 12 different categories, trying to break down fighter styles in a very rudimentary way. So as you can see up on top, subpar grappling, striking, focus, then the record of this particular fighter against the style of their opponent over their UFC career, and then the percentage below that is the style versus style percentage, then just the measurables on the right side, and that is what you're going to be seeing on the screen here, obviously aside from all of the main stats. Be sure to stick around to the end where we will show CM.Monk's picks and the M.O.N.K most owned no nonsense pick of the week for UFC Paris. Let's go.
Promise me 1,000,000 times that you will never do another rule.
The fight order that I will be presenting to you is likely not the final fight order. However, I do have all 11 fights worth of stats to show you, so please stick around. Hit the like on this video and hit the sub on the Monkmatics channel as well. First fight as of now, Taylor Lapilus getting a new opponent, Loughran. I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but who knows. Lapilus does not have a salary as his opponent, Gaffarov, dropped out a few, just like hours before DraftKings put out their salaries, basically. So he currently does not have a salary. I'm not sure where he is going to be, but let's just focus on the stats for now, and that's the whole point of the show. I'm just trying to bring you as many stats as possible to help you make those informed decisions for those GPP and cash game tournaments. Overall pacing for Lapilus, under 3 points a minute, allowing just over 3 points a minute. He is doubling up his opponents at distance. Inside the distance, it's relatively even, but he does have a slight edge over his opponents. Lapilus is 3-1 in the UFC, scoring 82.32 points per win overall and a ceiling of less than 100 points. Not great, but he did only allow 63 in his 1 loss. Only one of those 3 wins has netted him over 100 points, 40% takedown accuracy, landing about a half a takedown per 15 minutes, while allowing 1.75 takedowns per 15 minutes. However, he does have an 81% takedown defense. Controls 53% of all grappling time he's involved in, no round 1 finish wins or losses, a decent power index and submission index, and no one has knocked him down or thrown up a submission against him, and a very, very good strength of schedule at 77.06. Meanwhile, this is Loughran's first fight in the UFC, so I have no stats for him, coming over from, I believe, Cage Warriors. Ceiling and floor is just the average for the bantamweight division, and his strength of schedule in his last 5 is 67.23. You'd like to see that about 70. Anything less than that is a little below average. Anything more, obviously, above average. And
Sure.
we are below average here with Loughran, but that's what you do expect when you get a debuting fighter. Loughran is 8-0 in his professional career, 5 KO TKO wins, 2 submission wins, and 1 decision win as well. 27 years old, and he came in at 9,300 this week against Ghemmouri. He is not fighting Ghemmouri now, and he will still be 9,300 points. So we've really got to pay attention to what Lapilus is at, and we have to determine where the value is going to lie, if there is indeed any value left at 9,300, or if we should be on the Lapilus side, or just fade this fight overall. Very interesting way to start out this card for sure. Jacqueline Cavalcanti, UFC debutante, taking on Zara Fairn. Fairn 0-3 in the UFC, losing to Josiane Nunes, all 5'1" of her, Felicia Spencer, and Megan Anderson. The stats for Zara Fairn are terrible. In fact, the only good one is her at-distance pacing, which is 3.4 points a minute, allowing just 2.5. But she's getting outpaced almost over 4-1 inside the distance, allowing almost 6 points per minute. She gives up 101 points per loss on average, controls just 6.2% of all grappling time she's involved in, and somehow she's coming in above her average salary of $6,700 this week. Has a decent strength of schedule, but that's about the only other good stat that we have here. Not looking forward to rostering Zara Fairn, whether it's against a debutante, whether it's against someone that's 5'1" or someone like Megan Anderson who's 6'4.5" or whatever she is. So not too interested in the upside from Fairn as far as a DraftKings perspective. Her opponent, Jacqueline Cavalcanti, UFC debutante, like I mentioned. Her ceiling and floor, as you can see, is just the average for the division at women's bantamweight, and her strength of schedule leaves a lot to be desired at just 57.54. She is 5-1 in her professional career with 3 KO TKO victories and 2 decision wins. 9,400 for a debutante is pretty crazy, but when you're fighting a fighter who's 0-3 and gives up 101 points per loss, it's not so bad. You'd like to see Cavalcanti get a first round finish to really pay off that salary, unless she can pull a JJ Aldrich, about 107, 108 points at this price.
Out of the fucking blue!
I really think this one's a good one to fade overall. It should be noted that Fairn has been finished twice in her UFC career, once by KO TKO, once by submission, so Cavalcanti can find several ways to get this done, and I would not count out a finish from Jacqueline this week. Just not sure if she's going to pay off that salary, but again, I did say the same thing last week about JJ Aldrich. Here we've got one half of the Bash brothers. Farid Basharat taking on Cledson Rodrigues. Both gentlemen have pretty good stats. Let's start with Basharat here at 9,200. Average stats overall, but what really worries me is that he only put up 81.5 points. Granted, it was against M.O.N.K, who has proven to be extremely tough and durable, but 81 points at 9,200, just not a good start for your DraftKings career. Decent takedown accuracy in that fight, 50%. Landed 3 takedowns, stuffed 5 of 6 takedowns from Blackshear, and he controlled 68% of all grappling time he's involved in. However, he only 9x'd his salary in that fight. 62.93 last 5 strength of schedule is nothing to brag about. And bottom line here is we do not have a ton of information on Farid Basharat. This is someone you're going to have to do your fight tape on. And same with Cledson Rodrigues. I mean, his fight against Shannon Ross basically needs to be thrown out, as everyone knows Shannon Ross is one of the worst flyweights in the division. Rodrigues absolutely went off, scoring 131 points and finishing Shannon Ross in less than 1 minute. It should be noted this fight is at bantamweight, so Rodrigues is moving up a weight class, which could be interesting here for Basharat, and I am very interested to see how that plays out. The strength of schedule here for Rodrigues, not great, but still almost 5 points better than Basharat at 67.18. Like I said, the Shannon Ross stats need to be thrown out, and Vergara did beat Cledson Rodrigues in Rodrigues' debut fight. Rodrigues was 9,400 in that fight and lost a split decision, scoring 60 points in the process. So a pretty good score overall. Decent minute winner as well, as he does put up 5.4 significant strikes per minute. I'm probably going to be around field weight on both of these guys, maybe a bit more on Rodrigues just because he's so cheap at $7,000, and he does have obvious DraftKings upside. Like I said, scoring 131 points, whether it's against Shannon Ross or not, you still got the job done in less than a minute. So I am interested in rostering you for DraftKings. That said, Basharat, some people say that he's the lesser of the two Basharat brothers, but we will see in this one. I do think 9,200 is a bit much to pay, especially for the stats that we have seen. But again, Blackshear is no joke, very durable. So we're really going to have to see what Basharat is made of here against a beatable yet dangerous Cledson Rodrigues. Won't take long to break down. We've got 2 UFC debutantes here. Morgan Charriere, I don't know, the last pirate. I did watch a couple of his fights, I believe, in Cage Warriors again. Has a ton of professional experience. 18-9-1 is his professional record, and if you don't like to count, that adds up to 28 fights, and the guy is 27 years old, guys, so a ton of experience at his very young age. A very good strength of schedule over his last 5, much better than we usually see in UFC debutantes. 72.72, so a bit above average there. Ceiling and floor for both guys is exactly the same, and that's because it's just the average for the weight class. Strength of schedule for Morgan's opponent, Manolo Zecchini,
Antonio Margarete.
57.37, so extremely bad for Mr. Zecchini. I have no stats for this fight, guys. Do your fight tape on this one. Morgan Charriere, $9,100, Zecchini at $7,100. Find out if you think there's any value on Zecchini at 71. If you think so, put him in your lineups. If not, maybe think about Charriere at 9,100, especially if you think he can get a finish. He does have 10 KO TKOs in his professional career, 3 submission wins, and 5 decision wins. Also a ton of decision losses, and by ton I mean 8 decision losses overall. So you think he has a chance to finish? Get him in your lineups at 9,100. Let's keep him moving. $8,800 this week. Loosa taking on $7,400 McKee. McKee coming back to the UFC after losing his debut fight against none other than Khamzat Chimaev. What a welcome gift that the UFC gave Mr. McKee. Also dropped his second fight in the UFC to Alex Morono, and that was it for Mr. McKee. Well, he is back, and let me tell you, you got to throw his stats out for the most part. I mean, he got served up to Khamzat Chimaev, like I said, beaten in 3 minutes, landed 0 significant strike. In fact, he scored 0 DraftKings points in that fight. Absolute donut. Big fat 0 in that one.
It does hurt, actually.
Against Alex Morono, the complete opposite. It wasn't a very close fight according to the stats. However, McKee scored 51.76 points in that fight, an extremely high number for a losing total. Meanwhile, Loosa lost his debut fight to Munir Lazez, scoring 36 points, and then scored 124 against AJ Fletcher. So a bit up and down to start his career. Definitely another one you're going to have to do the fight tape on, because you got to throw those Khamzat stats away for McKee. That's pretty ridiculous. The Alex Morono stats, he did land 124 significant strikes, 8.27 a minute, but he got hit with almost 12 strikes a minute from Alex Morono, guys. 12 strikes a minute. Meanwhile, Loosa getting outpaced at distance, but inside the distance, it's a completely different story. About 4.5 to 1, almost 5 points a minute, allowing less than 1. As I mentioned, did score 124 points in his win against Fletcher, a fight in which he put up almost 16x his salary. Controls 77.31% of the grappling time and has a 100% takedown defense so far into his UFC career. No round 1 finish wins or losses, no knockdowns, no submissions, none attempted, and a sub 69 strength of schedule in his last 5. $8,800 seems like a lot to pay for Loosa. However, 124 points in his last victory is definitely something you cannot overlook. I like this fight for DraftKings. I think McKee could come out pretty wild, and so therefore a finish is definitely a possibility here. I will be playing both sides of this one for DraftKings, probably about field weight, as I do think the winner has a decent chance of scoring well if they can implement their proper game plan. Jocelyn Edwards, $8,300, taking on UFC debutante Nora Cornolle, $7,400 for Cornolle. I have no stats for her. Her ceiling and floor is just the average for the division, and her last 5 strength of schedule is probably about the worst on the card, 56.02. Not good at all. Again, you want that to be about 70. She does have 6 wins in her professional career. All 6 are finishes, 5 KO TKO victories, and 1 submission win. Her 1 loss was a decision loss. Meanwhile, Jocelyn Edwards, like I said, $8,300, no finish wins or losses in the UFC. She is 4-2, and all 6 fights have gone to decision. Lots of red stats, as you can see. There is nothing that is jumping out to me about Jocelyn Edwards fights. 3.44 points per minute at distance, allowing just 1.85 is about the best number you're going to see on this card. She's getting outpaced at distance almost 3-1, scoring less than 81 points per win over 4 wins, never over 100 points, 15% takedown accuracy, terrible, 65% takedown defense, which is okay, but she allows more than 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, controlling less than 15% of all grappling time she's involved in, and now we have to pay almost $400 more than her average salary of $7,900. Less than 10 average value per win, no round 1 finish wins or losses, no knockdowns. She has thrown up a submission or 2, and her strength of schedule is not great at under 68.5. A lot of people think she lost her last fight against Lucy Pudilova. It was very close split decision. Before that, she beat Ji Young Kim, Ramona Pascal, took an L to Jessica Rose Clark, who's no longer in the UFC, and Carol Hossa. So I don't have a ton of faith in Jocelyn Edwards. I don't have any interest in playing her in DraftKings for the most part. I do probably think she wins this fight. I wouldn't be surprised if she lost. lost, however, but I would be surprised if this one does not go to decision. So I'll be looking to fade this one overall. Do your fight tape on Nora Cornolle. See if she has a chance to finish Jocelyn Edwards. Again, no finishes for Jocelyn Edwards, win or loss so far in the UFC. So this has decision written all over it unless you think Cornolle can get it done inside the distance. The other half of this week's Switch 'em Up fight is now William Gomis taking on Ghemmouri. Ghemmouri, UFC debutant here, no stats for him obviously, and his last 5 strength of schedule leaves a lot to be desired at just 62.74. William Gomis, $8,400 this week. None of his stats are really jumping out. He is 2-0 in the UFC with wins over Francis Fire Marshall and Jarno Aarons, who we just saw take another L last week. No wins over 100 points. In fact, his DraftKings points per win is just 61, as he put up 41.91 against Marshall.
So sad. So sad. So sad.
And almost 80 against Aarons. Wow, that is extremely low. 60% takedown accuracy, landing 1.5 per 15 minutes, controls 65% of the grappling time he's involved in, and has a 71% takedown defense, which is not very poor at all. $600 over his average salary so far, with an average value of just 7.8 per win. Yikes. Has had a couple of submissions thrown up against him, and also has a subpar strength of schedule at 67.21. So there is nothing really interesting here about any of these stats. However, here is one that I find extremely interesting. Since both fighters were fighting other people and have already had salaries assigned to them, they are now fighting each other at the price of $15,300 overall, $6,900 plus $8,400. That is what I have coined as an unnatural salary, meaning a salary that does not equal $16,200. Someone makes the optimal lineup at a rate of 84%. Now, 19 times since 2021 has the total salary been under $16,200. 17 of those times, someone from those fights has made the optimal lineup. That is an 89.5% optimal rate, guys. This is definitely a fight you need to target. I don't care if Gomis scored 41 points in a win. You have got to put him in your lineups this week against debutant Ghemmouri. He was 69. A huge dog against Loughran, and now he's fighting a guy that has 2 UFC fights. Whether he's looked good and scored well or not, this should be a huge advantage for William Gomis. And at 90% optimal, this is definitely one I want to target. And if something happens and Gomis, gets shocked, Ghemmouri has a chance to make the optimal with any kind of win at such a low salary. So absolutely get this fight in your lineups. 90% optimal for unnatural salaries under $16,200. Light heavyweight scrap between Volkan Oezdemir and newcomer Bogdan Guskov, the Tsarevich. I don't know what that means, but it kind of sounds cool. No stats for Guskov. He is 14-2 professionally, 12 KO TKO wins and 2 submission wins. One of his 2 losses, he did get KO TKO'd. The ceiling and floor you see is just the average for the division, and his last 5 strength of schedule is just under 70 points, which is decent for a UFC debutant. Oezdemir's salaries here, I should mention, Guskov $7,600 this week. Oezdemir $8,600, 6-6 in the UFC, 6-5 in 3-round light heavyweight fights. Few of his stats are decent. Some of them are a bit subpar here, scoring just 2.82 points per minute, allowing 2.85, so barely getting outpaced. At distance, it's about 50-50. Inside the distance, he's also getting outpaced 3 points a minute to 3.85. DraftKings points per win across his 6 wins is just 97.67. Does have a very high ceiling, however, of 123.5. That just tells me that he is very inconsistent in his scoring in his wins. A lot of up and down scores for Mr. Oezdemir. 3 of his 6 wins in the UFC have netted him over 100 points. 29% takedown accuracy, landing less than half a takedown per 15 minutes, and he has a very good takedown defense, 80%, allowing just 1.5 takedowns every 15 minutes. Controls just 45% of all grappling time he's involved in, and you do have to pay up significantly for Volkan Oezdemir this week against the debutant Guskov, $8,600 compared to just $7,733 average salary.
Damn!
11.5 average value per win is decent. You would like to see it a little bit higher than that. 2 of his 6 wins were round 1 finish wins, has a decent power index, has been knocked down as well, and has a very good strength of schedule at 79.13. He is just 2-3 in his last 5, losing to Yuri Prohashka, Magomed Ankalaev, and Nikita Krylov, beating Paul Craig and Alexander Rakic. This one is interesting. You're going to have to do your fight tape on Guskov, but I definitely favor Oezdemir for DraftKings at the very cheap favorite salary of 8,600. I think he has a chance to probably find a knockout here and score pretty well if that's the case, especially if it happens in the first round. If it doesn't happen in the first round, I don't think he's going to score very well at all. So you're going to have to decide on that one. Don't go overboard on Oezdemir this week, but I wouldn't exactly be fading him either, thinking this one goes to a decision. And here's where things really start to pick up. We've got Benoit Saint-Denis, 8,500, taking on Thiago Moises at 7,700. Let's start with Saint-Denis, one of the best DraftKings upsides on the entire card outside of people named Serghei Spivac this week. I mean, look at all of these green numbers, guys. 5.3 points a minute is what he's scoring, allowing just 3. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents. Inside the distance, 3-1. 4.6 points a minute, allowing just 1.8. 118.5 points per win on average, guys. He put up 115 against Ismael Bonfim, first round submission. He put up 135.5 against Gabriel Miranda, second round KO TKO, and 105 in a second round submission over Nicholas Stoltz. His one UFC loss was up a weight class against Zaleski dos Santos, so we're not really counting that. And even if we were, he put up 42.8 points. And if you remember in that fight, he was getting beaten mercilessly towards the end of that fight and possibly the entire third round.
I was supposed to die, but a fish bumped me out with its nose.
Still ended up with 42.85 points. So this guy is putting up points per minute for sure. All 3 of his wins 100 points or better. 30% takedown accuracy, but he is landing 3.8 takedowns per 15 minutes, guys. 27 takedown attempts in 4 fights thus far into his UFC career. Fantastic takedown defense, 86%, allowing less than half a takedown per minute. Controls 85% of all grappling time he's involved in. You do have to pay a bit over his average salary, about $425 over his average, but for these DraftKings numbers, I will not hesitate to be getting him in my lineups. 14.5 average value per win, fantastic. One of his wins, like I mentioned, was in the first round. Huge power index, nice submission index as well, and he has a good strength of schedule at 72.6. Plus his nickname is the God of War. I mean, come on, man. God of War? It doesn't get much better than that. Thiago Moises at distance leaves a lot to be desired as he is getting outpaced by almost a point per minute. Inside the distance, very good. 3.68 points a minute, allowing just 2, but his DraftKings points per win is really where I get hesitant on this fight, scoring just 82.87 per win. And that's with 113 against Melky Costa and 101 against Christos Giagos. 2 guys he should definitely beat, and did handily, but he should easily beat them. Dropped triple digits in both those fights, and his average is still only 82%. That is extremely worrisome. Yeah, you go down to his last win before that, Alexander Hernandez, 51 points in that fight. So very, very worrisome DraftKings output from Thiago Moises. 3 of his 6 wins over 100 points, 46% takedown accuracy, controls 71% of all grappling time he's involved in. You're saving $500 this week off his average salary. Average value per win is less than 10, which is pretty low. 76 strength of schedule overall in his last 5. I love this fight for DraftKings. I will be much heavier on Benoit Saint-Denis as his DraftKings upside is far greater than Thiago Moises in my opinion. This should be a grappler's delight.
Now, what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat.
For sure. I like Moises a little bit, but again, his DraftKings points per win is just not where I need it to be. And I think Saint-Denis is not just going to allow him to score 114 points against him, 101. I would be pretty surprised if Moises got the win and put up triple digits in this fight. So I like Saint-Denis a lot more than Moises for DraftKings.
I actually want to go to Haunted House more than I want to go to Aqua.
But I will have both guys rostered probably over the field if I can get there. Co-main event of the evening is a good one. Manon Fiorot taking on Rose Namajunas. Rose hasn't fought for almost a year and a half, and her numbers are relatively good overall. 4.5 points a minute inside the distance, allowing just 3.2. Her points per win, not the best, 97.41, but she does have a very high ceiling of 122 points. Again, that just tells me she's a bit of an up and down scorer when she wins. That said, 6 of her 9 UFC wins have netted her over 100 points, has an insane 58% takedown accuracy, landing 1.6 per 15 minutes, while controlling 71% of all grappling time she's involved in. $800 under her average salary is what you can get Rose Namajunas at this week, and she has an average value per win of 12.65. You really want to see that at least 12, so anything above that is fantastic. Decent power index, never been knocked down, has had 1 or 2 submissions put up on her, and her last 5 strength of schedule is very good at 76.51. Meanwhile, Manon Fiorot, $8,900, almost 4 points a minute, allowing just 1.5. Her overall defensive pacing is fantastic. At distance, it's great at 1.33. Inside the distance, she's scoring 7 points a minute, allowing just 1.6, guys. 92.81 per win is a bit suboptimal for sure. Only 1 of her 5 UFC wins has netted her over 100 points. Manon has a 50% takedown accuracy, landing more takedowns per 15 minutes than Rose Namajunas, interestingly enough. 83% takedown defense, allowing just 1 takedown out of 6 attempts, and Manon controls 87% of all grappling time she's involved in, so much better grappling numbers from Manon than I would expect, and she's fought some decent competition, guys. Her strength of schedule is 73.16 in her last 5, and she's beaten Caitlin Chukagian, Jennifer Maia, Mayra Bueno Silva, Tabitha Ricci, and Victoria Leonardo. That's quite the lineup of women's flyweights to have on your resume. I love this fight. I'm going to be rooting for Manon Fiorot. I just don't know how much I like it for DraftKings. If no one finds a finish here, I really don't think this one's going to score very well. I'm hoping Fiorot can pull one out here, but this is going to be kind of a game time decision for me as far as how much I'm going to roster. I like Fiorot for the win, I think, but 8,900 might be a bit too much, especially if she's only going to get me 90 to 95 points in a win. Then I really wouldn't want to have much of her rostered at all. Meanwhile, you can't count out Namajunas just because she's been off for almost a year and a half. She has definitely surprised us before, and like I said, 6 of her 9 wins over 100 points, and at 7,300, that's a lot of potential value that you cannot pass up. So I'm probably going to have more than I would have originally thought of Namajunas, even though I like Fiorot for the win, but I'm not going to fade Fiorot completely, even at her very low DraftKings points per win number relative to her current salary of 8,900. I will probably have around field weight of her at least. We did it, guys. Main event of the evening. Before we get into it, hit the like on the video, hit the sub as well, as we are on the way to 600 subscribers on the Monk Maddox channel. I really appreciate it. Takes you just a second and it's totally free. Hit the bell as well if you never want to miss a game theory or nickname show ever again. We've got a banger of a heavyweight fight here, and I've seen a lot of people going back and forth on this one. Ciryl Gane, $8,700, taking on Serghei Spivac, aka Nosferatu, at 7,500. I love this fight. I think this is definitely one you have to target for DraftKings, as both guys are putting up pretty good numbers overall. Let's start with the underdog though, 7,500. Every single number but one is green for Serghei Spivac, and that is his at distance pacing. Overall, he's scoring 4.7 points a minute, allowing just 2.19. At distance, getting outpaced 1.7 to 2.5, but inside the distance, guys, 5.65 a minute, allowing just 1.39. 116 points per win, 136 point floor is the highest on the card, and he dominated Derek Lewis, 134 points, 136 against Augusto Sakai, 113 against Hardy, and 75 against Oezdemir. He did put up a big fat goose egg against Tom Aspinall. And those names I just read off, not the best strength of schedule overall, despite his number for that category being 73.76. Man, that is a rough strength of schedule, especially when you compare it to Ciryl Gane, John Jones, Tai Tuivasa, Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis, and Alexander Volkov. But let's get back to Spivac here. 6 of his 7 wins have netted him over 100 points, 66% takedown accuracy, and guys, he lands 5.05 takedowns per 15 minutes. Takedown defense is 70%, controls 73% of all grappling time he's involved in, coming in $1,133 under his average salary this week, with an average value of 13x.
I drink it up!
2 round 1 finish wins, 2 round 1 finish losses as well, so definitely a stat you want to target for DraftKings. As you know, round 1 finish wins and losses score very well for the fighter or their opponent, so some very good numbers overall from Serghei Spivac. I just wish those names I read off to you were a little bit better as far as competition goes. Meanwhile, Ciryl Gane, 8,700. Overall pacing is okay, 2.69, allowing just 1.3. At distance, it's good. He's only allowing 1 point per minute. DraftKings points per win leaves a lot to be desired at 92.42. He scored 99 against Tuivasa, 89 against Lewis, and 85 against Alexander Volkov, so not exactly knocking your socks off with his DraftKings scores. Just 2 of his 8 UFC wins have netted him over 100 points. 45% takedown defense, guys. That's it, 45%. Best believe that will be tested here against Serghei Spivac. Gane does control 56% of all grappling time he's involved in, which is a bit surprising to me, and he's also coming in $100 cheaper than his average salary. Average value per win leaves a lot to be desired at just 10x, and has a very good strength of schedule, as I mentioned, 77.75. I will have my fair share of this fight, but please believe I will have much more Serghei Spivac than I will Ciryl Gane. That said, one of Gane's paths to victory is definitely an early finish, so you cannot count out Ciryl Gane as far as DraftKings goes, even though he's only averaging 92 points per win and only 2 of his 8 wins over 100 points. Meanwhile, if Spivac wins, you have got to expect a ton of takedowns, a ton of control time, and probably some ground and pound as well. So I like both sides for DraftKings. Definitely prefer Spivac at 7,500, but this should be an absolute banger, and the winner could look like they're minus 500 after this one. Who knows? So get these guys in your lineups. That's going to do it, guys. Now let's throw to Monk to check out CM Monk's picks for UFC Paris. CM Monk had a rebound week last week, going 10 of 13, 77%, bringing his year-to-date total up to 58.84%. Meanwhile, me personally, I took a huge L, going 5 of 13 last week for a 38% win rate. Overall, I dipped back below 60%, 59.94. Still beating CM Monk, but I've got a lot of work left to do, guys. Here are CM Monk's picks for UFC Paris. It's all chalk. It is almost 100% chalk. Taylor Lapilus, decision over Loughran. Jacqueline Cavalcanti, decision over Fairn. Farid Basharat, decision over Cledson Rodrigues. Morgan Charriere, decision over Manalo Zecchini.
Gorlami.
Ange Loosa, decision over McKee. Jocelyn Edwards, decision over Nora Cornolle. William Gomis, decision over Ghemmouri. Jesus, they're all favorites and they're all decisions. Volkan Oezdemir, finish, there we go, over Bogdan Guskov. Benoit Saint-Denis, decision over Thiago Moises. Manon Fiorot, decision over Namajunas. And our only other projected finish is the main event, Serghei Nosferatu Spivac by finish over Ciryl Gane. So some very chalky yet very interesting picks from CM Monk this week. Let's see how he does. Before we get you out of here, let's throw it over to Monk for the most owned, no nonsense Monk pick of the week, UFC Paris. Guys, I know what you're thinking. I actually changed it at the last minute. This 100% has to do with the stat I gave you earlier. 90% optimal in fights that have a cumulative salary of under $16,200. I like Gomis here to get the win over Ghemmouri. Unnatural salary, under $16,200. Those, again, make optimal almost 90% of the time. So I'm definitely going to have my fair share, in fact, more than my fair share of William Gomis. I don't care what his average DraftKings points per win is. This is strictly the unnatural salary stat that I am playing right now. 8,400, very easy to get into your lineups, guys. The original most owned no nonsense pick of the week, if you hate this one and you're like, this is dumb, it was going to be Benoit Saint-Denis. He has one of the highest upsides on the entire card. Very risky play, almost as risky as the third option I was going to give you, Serghei Spivac. So I love William Gomis this week. I love the upside of Benoit Saint-Denis, and I love the upside of Serghei Spivac, but that stat, 17 of 19 optimal, I just cannot get over that. So my most owned no nonsense Monk pick of the week, UFC Paris, is going to be $8,400. William Gomis. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Pray to Gianni.
1.0, 1.25.
That cost me a lot of money.
And hopefully the trend goes our way.
No, I'm honestly done. I don't want to read anymore.
We did it, guys. All 11 fights in the books for UFC Paris. Hopefully I gave you every pertinent stat that you need to help create those GPP and cash lineups this week. Some very interesting dogs, some very interesting favorites, and a few fighters with tremendous DraftKings upside. Not to mention the 2 unnatural salaries we have to choose from. Very, very high optimal rates there. Again, just a reminder, check out the Unnamed Nickname Show every Thursday, 9 p.m. Central, right here on the Monkmatics channel, where we just fuck around and make fun of and grade fighter nicknames. Let's get you guys out of here. As usual, I want all of you to enjoy the fights. So, enjoy, and we will see you in the next one.
I love this stuff. Only come here if you like that stuff.